were quite a couple of more people who accepted, so maybe they will flock in as we go. Yeah, so on rather short notice, because we are aware that rapid program assessments are going on, respectively, you're starting with your midterm planning process. And because of the recent release of the new publication moving towards SOS Villages of Tomorrow, we thought it would be helpful to offer this session. Um, I don't need to tell you that we have a new strategy since last year, where at least 4, if not 5, of the strategic initiatives are relevant specifically for programming. At the time when the strategy was released and started to be discussed, it became quite clear that it's not very detailed, because obviously it's a strategy till 2030, so it was lacking some in-depth and more clarification of what is exactly meant behind some of the words, or what is expected from you in the countries and the programs in which direction to develop. And for that reason, there was a group or several groups of people working on these briefing papers, which were under the umbrella of the development of the quality standards project, where I'm also in the steering team. So for that reason, our region had a little bit more chance to give input also to these briefing papers that we will briefly go through. And also we were asked to give extensive feedback to the publication moving towards SOS Children's Villages of Tomorrow. So also quite a number of people from our region gave input and influenced this paper to reflect the reality also in our region. So I will start sharing my desktop. So far about the explanation of these different papers that kind of are being shot out now, shooting out of the international office. There was quite a hurry with the briefing papers and also with the other publication, because the idea is that they will frame and guide member associations during the midterm planning process and the rapid assessment process. Sorry. Um, so where are we? So I sent you the link on our great new virtual collaboration platform, where I often have difficulties to find papers. So the new report is here, moving towards SOS Children's Villages of Tomorrow. It's under in the workspace of publications. And under the strategy 2030 workspace, you at the end can find the individual briefing papers. And I think in December, I also sent you all of them in one document, so it's a bit more easy to handle. I will switch now to a PowerPoint presentation. So the idea basically of our discussion now is not that we do one presentation after the other, because I assume you have by now read, or at least kind of went quickly through those papers. And the idea is really to just stimulate the discussion, your input, your questions, your concerns, or also bravo to these papers. Maybe also to mention is that these papers will, to a certain extent, also influence the quality standards, which are currently under development. So whatever input is coming from you now, which would be relevant for the development of the standards, for example, that you say something is not reflected properly in the papers, or there's really a different approach, or we really need to say it doesn't work for us, then I would feed that back into the project of the quality standards, so at least that it's fixed there, or at least considered there. So that's the idea of the session. Also, at some point, if we kind of run out of discussion and we still have some time and you're interested, Rosie, who is the project manager for the rapid assessment of the programs in the region, we can go in some details. If you have questions to templates or to the process, then we can also tackle that if there is a wish to do so. As I can't watch questions coming in, Rosie, can you tell me if there are questions on the question panel or comments, please? Okay, so this is a presentation we got from the I/O just now. It's a very broad one, and I will just use the first 2 slides. It's about the briefing papers. And the purpose of the papers is, as I said, to unpack the key program directions outlined in the strategy, to give guidance on implications for our program work, and to outline promising practices. As you have seen, there are quite a number of case studies or short case descriptions in the papers. And what is important, and I always mentioned it, that it doesn't offer a one-size-fits-all solution, and they are not a binding policy direction. So they are not policy papers. This was a bigger discussion in the steering team. What are these papers? So at this point, they are not policy papers. They are more meant as guidance, and therefore they are also not so strict. And obviously, as we talk about the whole world, they don't fit all regions to the same way. And now, just very briefly, these are the 10 papers that were released. So the first one is kind of like an intro to the others, I would say, or a summary of the different directions this strategy is taking. The second one, because there was quite a big controversy or question marks, I would say, of what do we mean with integration of SOS families. So it's, I would say, a first attempt to kind of specify and elaborate more what is meant by the strategy with integration of SOS families. The third one is on foster care, the fourth on the care profession empowerment, the fifth on young people's care and accommodation, 6 on youth employability, 7 reintegration of children from alternative care, 8 family strengthening, 9 education in the SOS-TV program, and 10 alignment of education and health facilities, which to a large extent already happened in our region, so it's less relevant for us. However, those of you who went through this, there's quite a high demand from other regions to share our experiences. So I'm happy if you contact me if you would be ready to travel somewhere and work with some African countries, for example. I don't know if it will be travel, but there is a need for exchange because they are still very much immersed and partly lost in that process. Yeah, so far about the briefing papers. Maria and I, or now mostly Maria, will take a lead and focus on the briefing paper 1, or the general one, and on briefing paper 2. But we are ready. Obviously, foster care, the briefing paper 3 is very relevant for our region. So I don't know if Maria would go into some slides on that. We will see. But I think at least we're ready to answer and discuss, or not answer questions, but discuss also questions or issues that might come from the other briefing papers from your side. So I would keep it rather flexible. So our presentation input is limited because, as I said, you by now read the papers and you probably already have specific questions. So we will just really have a brief intro to all of them and focus on the second one, integration of SOS families. But questions and whatever are open for all the papers. I don't know if there are any questions or requests or inputs at that point. Are you fine with this, how we go along? We have 1.5 hours. I don't know if we will need all this time, but let's see. Okay, so it seems all clear for now. So I will stop presenting and hand over now to Maria for a more general introduction. Oh, sorry, for starting with the briefing paper 1 and 2.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you, Nicola. So I can start sharing, right?
Yep, you should.
Can you see? No, cannot see. I have to do that. Okay.
Yep.
Coming.
Yes. So coming.
Okay, you can start, I think.
Okay, Rosie, say yes. So we can start. Yeah. Regarding the first briefing paper, this is about learnings from SOS Children's Village of Tomorrow. Actually, this briefing paper summarized the main conclusions from case studies done in 2015, mainly 2014-2015. And looking in the participants of today's call, I can say it's coming, many of these case studies actually came from our region. It means we have from Urgench, from Estonia, from Kosovo. Yeah, so you can also find your case studies as examples in this paper. But I would like to focus on the main, let's say, some main points which are relevant, mainly relevant for our region. And the first thing that I would like to talk a little bit more, this is the range of services, alternative care services, because as you know, we use the term family strengthening, family-based care, but we have to be also aware that there is a little bit difference of what we call family-based care and what is recognized as a family-based care in the international global documents like UN guidelines for alternative care. So if you look on this slide on the green side, so in green, from this whole range of care settings, starting from parental care or care in the natural biological family, through kinship care organized as a foster care, typical foster care, then we have some family-like care, like SOS Family, which was I remember when the UN guidelines were developed, it was a big lobbying efforts from our side to find a place for our SOS families in this range, and this is more or less here. Then it's a small residential type of care, like small group homes, short-term placement, emergency shelters, and again, lasting with the large residential facilities. So according to the UN guidelines for alternative care, when you say family-based care, it means any type of alternative care when the child lives in existing family. So it means our own family, family of relatives, or foster family which already exists in the community. All other forms of care, which is, let's say, created by the provider, including SOS families, are recognized as a residential care setup. So it's a little bit different from our understanding that you can see in blue. I think it's also important for us once we have a lobbying and advocacy initiative, so we have to be careful what kind of terms we're using, but I think that for majority of countries in our region legally, it followed the same logic like the UN guidelines. What is important, what this paper say to us, briefing paper, so now SOS would like to find appropriate response to the situation of the children in the specific location, starting from support of the biological family through the whole range till small group homes. So it means something that in majority of our countries we see that it's more or less already happened because we have developed new services. We do not stay only with SOS families. And here in the next slide, we summarize what we have at the moment in our region, more or less. So the big development we see in area of foster care, because this is also in the agenda for our governments. And here we have countries where they, let's say, provide foster care in the villages and outside of the villages for a relatively long period of time, like in Czech Republic, Hungary. But we also have a number of countries that go or went through the process of transformation of children's villages into foster care. So like in Ukraine, in Russia, in Bulgaria, in Macedonia. So when it comes to the foster care, still in majority of the cases, our SOS foster families are living in the typical children's villages, and more or less the style of living, it's the same like SOS families. So it's also important for the other briefing paper that we call integration of the families.
Maria, there's a first question in the chat box, and it fits actually quite well also to your previous slide, from Julia from SOS Russia. Are there any criteria for sending a child for one or another form of alternative care, for example, SOS family or foster family?
Usually these criteria, they are developed nationally and they are international law. The most general criteria, they are so-called necessity and appropriateness of the care. These two principles, they are well explained in the UN guidelines. The idea is that, first of all, situation of each and every individual child should be assessed in a deep way, and based on that to find the most appropriate type of care. So this is ideally the logic. But in some countries, for example, it's clearly said that children below 0 to 3 cannot be in residential type of care. I know that in some legislation, maybe colleagues can also mention here examples that it's even ages higher, 5 or even 11 in some of the countries. So, but whether the child, until when child will stay in parental care, when to go to foster family, and if the foster family is the best option for this child, this decision should be taken on the individual level. So this range works well, in fact, if we have a well-developed and well-functioning system for child protection. I don't know if this answered to Julia to your question.
You can also unmute, Julia.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay, let's come back to foster care. So we have, when we have foster care, but majority of you in this meeting now, you already passed through this process, you know better than me that it means also to change the status of SOS mothers, to change their employment status very often, different working conditions and so on. So we also have cases when state foster families come and live, and they live in our children's villages. So we have a mixture of traditional SOS families plus foster families like in Russia and Belarus. And what we see is a tendency in some member associations, once they start to implement foster care, then we have less children per family comparing with traditional SOS families like in Czech Republic, in Bulgaria, let's see, in other countries. So as a next step, we see that some of the countries, they start to develop foster care networks with families who are living in their own premises in the community. And this is a very cost-efficient way to increase number of children for providing support foster families without providing them with infrastructure. Yes, so we have a number of countries, as you can see here, who plan to start with foster care services, and start, it means already this year or next year. And in this photo here, we'll talk a little bit more after that, but this is a photo from Sofia, and this is the typical apartment where now foster parents from Children's Village lives after the relocation process. And the other typical type of service that we have different from Children's Village in our region, these are short-term placements, and for now we have this in Czech Republic, in Lithuania, Kyrgyzstan, Poland, Georgia, Hungary, Kosovo. Sorry if I forgot something. Estonia recently started. So short term, it means that they clearly provide temporary care from 6 months to 1 year, or let's say 1 year and a half in some cases, for children who cannot be in care of their parents, and already in that stage it's clear that eventual exit will be reunification, or they will go in another form of alternative care, or the other option is adoption of the child. And in some countries like Georgia and Bulgaria, we also have a family type of small group homes for children. It's not only for young people like our youth facilities, but also for children who are below 14. Yes, this I would like to mention about Children's Village of Tomorrow and main learnings and where we are as a region. So I don't know if you have questions, comments on that before to move to integration of the villages. No?
I think maybe to mention one of the, I would say, general discussions right now, which is also tackled in this first paper, is our status and are we developing as a service provider, or are we more going into the direction of capacity building, or even just advocacy. It's not really mentioned like that we could be only an advocacy organization, but these are the discussions that are going on also right now. Where will we be? I read something here in the document, where it says in countries with strong governments, SOS Children's Villages act as a recognized service provider directly working with families. In countries where governments are unable or unwilling, community empowerment approaches are more sustainable, with SOS Children's Village as a catalyst more than service provider. I'm not sure about this statement, if this is kind of the right way of saying things, but it reflects the question of our how we are working in the future. So
I don't know, maybe we can also look and maybe it's worth colleagues to look on the examples from other NGOs in the country, because I know that number of big NGOs, they started with capacity building for the government, advocacy once the system was not properly established, and after that some of them became a service provider.
Yeah.
So this is also logical development, but I don't think that I don't know, Nico. I don't think it is possible to have a general statement on that. Maybe it's very much depends on the country and the possibilities.
Yeah,
for
and
NGOs.
on the finances, obviously. It was just one of the discussion that there was a meeting 10 days ago in Innsbruck, and some of the discussions go in that direction because obviously money is short. So the question is, how can we, all of our MAs remain as service provider MAs, or what would be the direction? But this is not part of this meeting. It was a more general discussion. Somebody is breathing heavily when I say that. No comment. Yeah, but it's.
I was just. I just wanted to add, but I agree with Maria because it depends on country. Because in Estonian case, for example, advocacy is not financed by the state, or also for fundraising, it is not a topic. So in our case, we can be very strong service provider. If we speak about the fundraising, for example, because our donors, they would like to concentrate on helping to improve the quality of the care. Advocacy is not a topic in our case for fundraising.
Exactly, and we need to emphasize that in case such arguments are coming towards us, and some of them will come. Yeah, thanks, Elmet.
Yeah, I think it's a good comment, because if the system is already established, for what to advocate for. But I think that we also, Nicola, we can see when it comes to foster care already difference in countries. Even when we are provider of the services, we have a different scope in different countries as a service provider. Depends what is given to us by the law. Like in foster care, in some countries, we are fully, like in Hungary, fully responsible for the care and foster parents. In some countries, like in Czech Republic, we actually provide services for foster parents and partly for the children. So maybe we will see some developments in the future. this direction. Okay, so the other topic, I have to go, like to find where is this wonderful slides with your villages, people. Yeah, here. Okay, when it comes to the other briefing paper with integration, yeah, Nicola already said, I think it was maybe the biggest discussion. What does it mean, integration? What we would like to see at the end when we say that our SOS families are integrated in the community. And what came from the international office, different models, that I will go a little bit now on that. And also when it comes to physical integration, social integration, I think it's something different that needs a further discussion. And we can see where we are in the region again, and maybe after that we'll discuss what we see as the challenges in these countries where they already start to think about and start to implement physical integration. So there is a model of physical integration when some families, SOS families, move to live in the community. So go outside and live there, or maybe it's not previous SOS families, but new SOS families that live outside of the fences, let's say, of the children's village. The other possible model, which for our region it's even difficult to see like something new, fact that SOS families use all existing community services like health, medical, educational services, out-of-school activities. And I think for majority of our villages it's already fact. So it's difficult to see this like a big revolution, but still I think here until we have a traditional organization of the children's village and families, we still can think how to increase the integration. So there is another model when, let's say, SOS families have a direct access to the neighborhood. It means that each and every house is more or less separate from the whole compound. And yeah, the model when other families from the community
have a door that I think that's the only that is different.
It's
a door in the garden that goes outside. They don't have to walk through the village.
Yeah, for me this slide it's very very good illustration that we actually haven't so much integrated villages, and it's difficult to find different models. So some of them seems very similar. But the other option is to have other families who are not SOS families that come and live in the village. So, and here we have a more integrated, let's say, in a community integrated setting. Still we talk about physical integration. And this is the case where we have a close network of families, let's say, living in a walking distance, easily can reach each and every family. There is a possibility to have like a family clusters or dispersed families, and this is again families who are in the community, but the main difference is the distance between the families. So all this is related with physical integration, and it's also raised the question that we have also among our team, even in case of these community integrated settings, is this enough to talk about the social integration of the children? Because maybe it's also possible to live very, how to say, isolated type of, to have a very isolated type of living. It doesn't matter that you are in a big city and the only family here, and all around are other families for the community. So how to increase the social integration of the children and the families, it appears maybe the biggest challenge when we talk about the integration. And what we have in our region, so we have few countries where we bring other families into children's villages, and this we have in Czech Republic, in Russia, in Belarus, and in this case we talk about foster families. I know that also some of other countries think about this model to develop in the future in case of free infrastructure or possibility to start to work in foster care area. And the other option is to have some SOS families who move or who live in the into the community. In this case, it's usually 40 kilometers distance from.
Maria, to add to the first one, in some countries, at least I know from Hungary, I don't know if Lena is in, Hungary is also thinking of moving just regular families from the community in one of their children's villages, basically to rent out those houses, so that there is a mix then between SOS families and community families. Yeah.
Yeah, I know that in Czech Republic also they have a similar. They think to do that in one of the villages, but yeah, for now it's mainly foster families. Yeah, okay. So thank you, Nicola. So the other possibility is when 40 kilometers, let's say 50 kilometers far maximum from the village in the nearest town or city. We have SOS families, and here we have only a few examples, but we know that some of you plan to have more families like that, like in Estonia and Kyrgyzstan. It's a new plan for 2017. So close networks of families. Yeah, Estonia, I think we talk about this example a few times, also in Hungary after the relocation, in Bulgaria, in Sofia after the relocation. And families organize more like a family cluster we have in case of Uzbekistan. Also in Bulgaria, in the other location, they are pretty far, families one from the other. And in Kosovo, in Pristina, this is more or less this model. And for dispersed families, we can talk in case of external foster care networks, like in Hungary, in Czech Republic, in Children's Village Brno, where the distance, the biggest distance is approximately even 100 kilometers. So it means to cover the whole region or whole area. Yeah, I think this were the slides that I would like to show you about the family integration. And Nicola, what do you think? We can open the discussion now, or you'd like to talk a little bit more about the challenges, what we see, and what are the plans for evaluations?
I would say this is. I don't know how much you looked into the international plan, but the action on integration was put on hold for 2017. But I'm pretty sure it will come as an action in 2018, which hopefully will include also money for evaluation and basically building the knowledge base of the organization on different forms of care. There's this big assumption that foster care in general is cheaper. It also says in the briefing paper there's some first evidence that it's less costly. So these things really have to be looked at carefully, because as we know, there are different forms of foster care. So of course, if they live in their own houses, it's probably different than if one of the services to foster parents is also that we give housing. Yeah, so this will come next year. But obviously it's a big part of the discussion right now. Those of you who are doing the RAPs will also know there is a controversy in terms of one of the questions, or actually the main questions related to impact and quality. There are only two questions related to this, how much impact and quality we have, and they're both related to integration. And there is a discussion right now to what extent can we say, yes, it's an integrated village just because only, under quotation mark, families are receiving services from the community. So if all these models are kind of recognized as community integrated, then the range is really broad, which will then obviously also limit, I think, the innovation, if we comfortably, or in some countries comfortably, sit back and say, oh, we are very well integrated because families use outside services, then probably change will be limited. So I'm just throwing this now in the discussion.
Okay, maybe I can stop presenting or...
No, you can leave this on for now.
Okay.
And another point that I would throw into the discussion, which is also linked into the briefing paper to partly on caregiver empowerment, but not only. I think what we will see of the external evaluations we're doing right now in Bulgaria and Hungary, and from preliminary findings, a big issue in terms of integration is, how much are the caregivers integrated in the community? How much are our still predominantly SOS parents participating in community life as role models for their children? How much are they going out and take gymnastic classes in the neighborhood? How much do they have friends and meet with people outside for a coffee or participate in social events in the community? I think we have a big issue here, and this obviously impacts then also on the children. So I think we have a blind spot here when we talk about integration. It starts with the caregivers. If my parents don't interact much with the outside world, I will also not do that most likely. And secondly, I think the other part is, if children have to move from their community of origin, if we call it like that, and also caregivers have to move from their community of origin and lose their social networks, this will also impact on the social integration. So if children move away far from their parents, which we still have in a number of countries that legislation allows that, then this also has an impact on social integration. So the big part on social integration discussions are starting, but it will be picked up again more in the course of the strategy. But we'll have to ask ourselves some tough questions, I think, with the model we are providing. How fit is it for social integration for caregivers and children? Yeah. So probably that's all from our side. And I would just open the floor now for comments, questions, not only to what Maria presented, maybe also have some key questions to some of the other briefing papers.
So
or
maybe
you can also ask if we shall go through the briefing papers. We have a presentation where each briefing paper is summarized in 4 or 5 points, but I don't know how helpful that is. So just let us know how you would like to proceed.
Maybe to stop to present that and to return to see the group of people, because we can also read the comments.
Yeah,
if
there are no comments right now.
But if there is a need, I can.
You can just unmute. I don't think we need to write necessarily. I think it goes faster. You can just unmute and talk.
Okay, Mario is speaking. Can I just add something?
Mario.
Yeah, I would like to refer to the question and comment that Nicola mentioned before, and it is related with are we moving from the service provider to a capacity building organization? Mainly I will speak about Macedonia. If foster parents are taking over full responsibility for admission and the care of a child, then SOS definitely is moving on a capacity building level and directly working with the foster parents to secure the competences and the quality of work of the foster parents in order to secure the quality of care. Then definitely we are slightly and maybe fully changing the direct beneficiaries of the organization, because directly we are working with the foster parents. We secure and we work with the children, but definitely the responsibility is with the foster parent. So this is like a comment I would like to raise and really to discuss in the future if we are shifting in the capacity building, what definitely would change the essence of our work, or where we can really change our core.
Would you, in your legislation, this is still called, you would be a service provider, right? Because you're providing services for training and supervision and whatever. So the service basically is called capacity building, or one of the services. Can one call it?
It's not really defined in the law, because the Social Protection Act's mainly focusing on the target group, for example, children without parents and parental care, and type of the protection or prevention services in the country. So this is not strictly elaborated in the law. So that's why we are asking ourselves if we are directly not really responsible for the care of a child. We can take over some responsibility to secure the quality of care, but through foster parents. because the main responsibility is within the child, within the foster parent.
Mm-hmm.
This is just my thoughts,
Yeah.
comments.
Any reaction?
Yes, something that I would like to share to really be somehow in the clouds to think about.
I would like, this is Yulia from Russia speaking. Also, I would like to add to the discussion that is very important for us also, because there are many service providers are coming, like in Russia now, since we are moving towards DEI as a goal. But in that case, we might lose our uniqueness, as we would be just like other organizations supporting foster families. I think that it's also important to keep SOS Family as a model, because it still have a great potential in this resources. Because in case of foster family, it's more or less closed structure, and we cannot. Especially if foster family living outside of children's village, and we not always cannot control the situation in family in terms of child protection and etc. So I think it's important that we think about this also, like what is the place of this children's village, not only in foster care.
And Julia, if you say the model of SOS family, which characteristics would you call then an SOS family? Does it necessarily mean that the family lives in a classical CV, or what is the characteristic?
Well, basically the labor contract would be important for us, at least, and in that case we have more control, I would say, on the situation, especially in terms of child protection.
You mean if they are under contract with SOS and not with the state?
Yes, yes.
But they can also live somewhere outside the children's village, but they are under your contract. So
yes,
that's an SOS family. Okay.
For example, and also like Mario said, what is the uniqueness? In this situation, if there are many service providers supporting foster families in the country, so how can we shape the value in terms of PR, for example, what we can promote as our uniqueness, as our brand in that situation? Thank you.
Thanks, Julia. Someone else would like to comment on that? I think partly this discussion boils down to finances. You know, how at the end of the day, you as SOS member association with decreasing funds, what can you still afford, especially those on the sustainable path? So can you continue afford to be a service provider? Can you pay for the staff and for the services, or will you not be able to do that anymore? So I think that will determine the direction at the end then that the MA takes. I mean, I'm very much in favor of remaining also as a service provider, but probably I think the discussion is, for example, very big in family strengthening. This was also at this conference or at this meeting. How long do we stay in one location as a service provider? Wouldn't it be better to build the old discussion? But now, because of finances, it comes back again strongly. Wouldn't it be better to hand it over at some point? Because it's so expensive to run it. So at the end of the day, whatever we can finance, then I guess, or you can finance, is possible to remain, however it's financed. And otherwise, yeah, probably it would be good then to at least be able to provide some capacity building if that is an option. Yeah, but family strengthening is very much under discussion also, kind of in terms of what's our role in terms of direct service provision, or rather building the capacity of the community to run the services. And I think we have room in our region actually to think about that. You know, we have a lot of FSPs, or a number of FSPs, I think, where we can really think, you know, it might be so small scale in one location, and it's difficult to finance. So why not, after some time, move to another community and try again to raise public funds again, because you can only raise public funds for a limited time for one and the same program. So maybe some more mobility and some more flexibility in family strengthening is something we could think about, or you could think about in the future, not to hold on too tightly to some of these projects, but be more flexible in opening new ones, or like Russia could do more of go into the business of offering trainings to other organizations. If it's a business, I'm not sure if it's a profit business. So I think here we probably have some room for thinking to be, yeah. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. Yeah, I guess the briefing papers seem to be very clear and not controversial. If I understand that right, so there are no real content questions from your side. Maybe just to ask you, do you see implications for your future program development based on these papers, or you think you are right on the way or in line with what they promote?
Yes, I can say that I can see a lot of possibilities of the briefing papers that can really strive our way to our visions for the strategies, and definitely we can use them in this midterm planning also, and also in strategic planning on the national level too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I think for all of you who went through the CVPP process anyway, this was the start of all of this. Yeah, I think the biggest issue and controversy will remain with the integration part, the number one of strategic initiative 1, and there are a lot of hopes. I think that costs can be reduced by going into different forms of care in order to move the country to the money to the growth cluster, to Africa and Asia. So I think here we can expect some further thoughts and rethink how we provide alternative care in a more integrated form. And some of you anyway already started in a good way. So just a second, Maria, can you take over?
Yes, yeah, I also think that because we do not discuss now this briefing paper on care profession, because it's a HR topic and we don't want to interfere in topic which is not fully PD. But I really would like to ask you to go carefully through the text, because here I think there are a lot to be done in our region, especially when it comes not only profession to be somewhere mentioned in the law, but everything related with the contracts, SOS mothers, labor contracts, working hours, working conditions, all these issues, because even if we manage to find some compromise solution in some of the countries due to the good image, maybe it's not very sustainable. I don't know. You know better. And the other point that I would like to mention, this is about reunification of children. This briefing paper, we already went with some of the colleagues, and we see that it explains one very ideal world where child welfare system is acting in a good way, and all decisions are taken like they should be taken by the state, and we are doing only what is our job as a care provider. But we know that this is not the reality in majority of our countries. So at the end, SOS is also involved in the activities which are pure state mandate, right? Like working with biological parents, supporting biological parents after the reintegration and so on. So for this briefing paper, we plan to organize some additional meeting, maybe with family-based care advisors, but we still think about that.
And just to add on foster care, Maria is offering for different countries now 1 to 3 day workshops on foster care. Those are on the way. So I think you're quite busy this year, but I think also to foster exchange between those ones who are advanced more in that area and those ones who are coming along now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so if there are no more questions on that, let me just know if those of you who are into the RAPs would like to ask some questions and have some more input, or are you all done and clear? All done and clear, it seems.
Just a general comment on the RAPs from my side, and maybe a tip would be to really use all the comments fields in the RAP templates to explain as much as possible the situation in your country, because it should be clear for someone who's not that accustomed to your context. It should be understandable for them as well. As you know, PSA colleagues will also be looking into the template, so it would save you more time later on if it's as clear as possible now, rather than answering more questions later. So that's a general comment from my side.
Yeah, thanks, Rosie. I mean, we went with Maria and Caroline yesterday through one country, and there we could also see a little bit from the language. It really needs to be. I was attending the meeting of managing directors last week of the Western European countries, so Germany, France, whatever. So 15 of them or something last week, and it's clear that they very often don't have a program background. So people who read that really need to, they are people who partly don't understand our language. So it needs to be tailored to people who are not necessarily experts in program. So very clear and simple and language. And please also keep in mind these briefing papers. We found in one of the countries where they said the main reason for admission is poverty. I know you don't mean it in that way, but the briefing paper, for example, clearly says it shouldn't be poverty, and probably or most likely it isn't in this country. But please make sure that you consider the language of these papers also, and be in line with these papers when you write the comments. Yeah. So far to say. So if everything else is clear, is there someone?
I just wanted to add, Rusudan speaking, that when Rosie mentioned that it's really important to show the local context, from this perspective, it's also important, I think, to see, not to answer only the mandatory questions. There are really important optional questions exactly for showing your local context.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're mandatory questions. And again, I mean, this also is not for the RAPs only, but also for midterm planning, where I think sometimes PSAs will be at least looking at it, try and refer or use the language of these papers that are basically the basis of the strategy 2030. So the more you can show that you are either already in line or moving towards the direction of the strategy, the better it is. So even quote or say, even say like required in the strategy 2030 and use some of the wording. I think that will be helpful.
And of course, if you want to refer to any previous evaluations or national research that you've done, feel free to upload that in your member association folder and then just refer to it in the data sheet so that, and anyone going to the workshop can also read up on it. So that,
Yeah, and maybe just as a last comment, I mean, it's now, I think it's the race for money. So it becomes clearer and clearer. We know that there are growth clusters. There are big ambitions to free money for Africa and partly Asia. So on the one hand, I would say wherever you see cost-saving potential, because there's also a cost-saving target obviously attached now to this whole planning process, please look into that. But on the other hand, also stay firm with your programs and say how needed they are and how it's appreciated by government. I mean, I don't tell you something new, but I can just see that the race for money is really heating up now. And as the strategy very clearly says, the money should go to growth clusters. Yeah, but we shouldn't. I think you need to stay firm. You need to stay firm and say that these programs you're doing are for the most vulnerable children. Please mention that as often as possible. Again, in the meeting with managing directors last week, I said how angry it makes me to see all our countries, when you look at the clusters, on the side of low child vulnerability. I think it's really not correct to say it in this way, because I know that the children you're working with are the most vulnerable, and they are definitely not on the low end, even if your country might be with the Human Development Index higher than Africa, but our target group is definitely not. So please always keep that in mind and make that argument when in the planning meetings. Yeah, and just emphasize that programs are needed also in Eastern Europe and Central Asia, that it's it doesn't mean, I mean, anyway, you all are already either in the challenge or self-sufficient cluster, which means that not big amounts of money will come towards you except for public funding and through one or other occasion, but not to cut it down further from where it is. So I think it will be really important to communicate it. I did my best last week. I showed also all our good examples. I showed how governments appreciate the work of SOS in the countries, how we become more and more of a partner, which also means that more money is coming from governments and that we see very good results in local income. But we definitely, I don't think we should develop, or you as member associations should develop from becoming a service provider to an advocacy NGO in order to save more money. So just in case these arguments come towards you, so there will be tough questions, so be prepared to say why it's important that you remain as a service provider and not just become an advocacy NGO who requires less money, obviously, than when you're a service provider. I know all the arguments, but just for you to be ready to answer these questions. Yeah, on that note, it shouldn't sound too negative. I could see how big the interest actually still is also with the PSAs in our region, and that it's not a uniform opinion that all money should go to Africa. So, I mean, obviously in your argument, don't say Africa doesn't need money or something. Of course they do, but also say how important the work is in our region, and it's important to keep. I think that's also an argument I say, you know, why cut or reduce the strong parts of the organization, because you are among the strong MAs globally, and we have so many weak programs that have been running for far too long in other regions, where one should take a closer look of maybe saving money. Yeah, so that's my passionate speech for our region, which will be good if you also be prepared to do that. Don't know if there are any questions or comments to that. Yeah, I think we're all in the same boat anyway. Yeah. Okay. Then I guess we end this conversation. Wasn't very lively discussion, but I hope that means that you anyway, it's clear for you where the strategy is going. Yeah.
May I?
Elmer?
Ashok speaking.
Oh, yeah.
Hi, everybody. Nicola, I think this is a very valuable input that you make together with your team, because it's very important for us, the national associations, also to understand and to have a certain position in the process. So I really appreciate this even short but important input that you make.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks, Ashok. Yeah, let's stand strong. You're great. You're doing good work. So we just need to keep on saying that and be convinced ourselves that we want to continue and grow also. And grow with your own money, grow with whatever possibilities there are. Yeah, thanks to all of you. Thanks for
And we're here to support you during the RAP, so please never hesitate to come to us for any questions or concerns that you have.
Yeah, and also ready to support in all these initiatives to go further. And anyway, these things are going on in youth employability and whatever, so there are good cooperations already. So we'll continue. Okay, have a great weekend. Take care and talk to you soon, hopefully. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
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 Bye everyone. Bye bye.